Our guest for today is a wonderful man of God, Pastor Neville van Wyk. He's one of the longest serving pastors at Rhema Bible Church. He's been a Christian for over 35 years and has qualifications in education, theology, and ministerial studies. He's experienced much pain and trauma in his life and also been a victim of chronic depression. He shares openly about his struggles in an attempt to help anyone in need or struggling with mental health issues. Thank you so much, Pastor Neville, for joining us today at the Safe Place to Land. It's very nice to have masculine energy.
Thank you for having me. Awesome.
And as you know, this is a space that we have created for believers and people, who are still exploring God, where we can come and talk about our human experiences and how God is able to meet us in our place of pain and suffering. So thank you so much for opening up,
Thank you.
Especially as a pastor, being willing to share your struggles with mental health, and how you overcame and how you found yourself in that space, what led into that situation where you really struggled with depression.
Right.
So we are going to be diving into that conversation today, and I'm absolutely grateful for you being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hopefully this helps somebody.
Yes.
That's our heart that it ministers to people.
Yes, that is the intention.
Yes.
That is the main goal. So let's start off. When did you realize that you wanted to be a pastor?
Quite early on, I think my heart was totally estranged from God. Growing up, I didn't grow up in a Christian environment. Didn't grow up in a church environment at all. My maternal side, my mom's mother was a praying woman, went to NGK, the Dutch Reformed Church back in the day. But that was the extent. I remember attending with her, but that was the extent of it while I was young. And very early on, I was probably maybe 6, 7 years old. My parents separated, got divorced. Went through an incredibly painful childhood with an abusive father that really became bad. And of course, my hate, internal anger turned towards a God, if there was one. And of course, my rationalized there's no way there could be a God how could he allow so much pain? So early on, I was quite young, maybe 10, 11, I was abused, molested by an uncle. So a bunch of, it was the perfect storm for me to turn away from the concept of a God. But in my late teens, met a girl, was interested in a girl that was playing the organ in a Anglican church in the area I lived in. And of course, no proper motives, pursued the young lady, and God used that. So I went to church for the wrong reason, but God used that to then sow seed into me. And then ultimately get me to the place where when that relationship broke up, I had no place to turn to but God. And hence, my conversion. So it started out from about 19. The real change was around 21. But yeah, once that happened, I wasn't the same. Within a few months of a new relationship, this young lady told me, I sense that, you may be the type of guy that ends up, because she was Catholic, she said, I think you're going to be a father one day. And I joked, I thought, what? You're nuts. And I laughed about it. I said, man, I like women too much. What do you mean? These guys can't get married. So, but she wasn't far off. I came to the church that I'm at and realized something was stirring in me that was confirmed prophetically. So at 2021, I knew, and it started burning in me so much so that it was a do or die thing. I remember praying, if you don't bring me into the ministry, take me home. You know, it's, why live if I'm not going to do what you call me to do? So it became a really big thing.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about, childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And we know, we're having a conversation earlier on, we know that this is what the enemy does. He uses trauma to push us further and further away from the love of God.
Yes.
And can we go deep into, your teenage years? How did that childhood trauma affect how you then became during your teenage years?
It was massive. I sought, from the earliest stages, became the class clown in primary school because of my need for approval. The greatest wound, I can speak about it freely now, but I couldn't a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
The greatest wound in my own life was rejection. And there were several wounds, but rejection was one of the main ones. And I sought my father's approval. He was a very abusive man. I was bullied at school. I was very tiny, very small, super skinny, got bullied. So all of those things then happened that made me seek for approval in the wrong places. When my parents got divorced, you internalize somehow and think, well, maybe if I was a better child, they would have been together. Maybe it's my fault. But you move past that. My father was a skilled manipulator, lied to us. I've got a younger brother and a sister, but my younger brother said, he said to us that your mother left us for another man, and which wasn't true. He was physically abusive. He was emotionally abusive. He would have probably killed my mom had she not left. And so the trauma, my mom got custody of us, but she was told, if you take these two boys, you won't live long enough to enjoy them.
And she had enough reason to be afraid.
Oh yeah. He beat her to a pulp. She was a school teacher by profession, and there was many times she had to go to school or stay out of school because she had a blue eye, busted lip, or went covered up with makeup. So he physically abused, and I witnessed that. Got tremendous amount of resentment towards my dad. And when I spoke about it in therapy, in counseling, I remember saying I was too young to do anything about it, because even then I felt it was my place to stop it. But he was 6'3" and 145 kilos. There was nothing I could do.
There was nothing you could do.
So it was very, very tough. But it shaped me. It made me a very angry young man. When the hormones finally kicked in, I started training and working out. I went from one of the smallest guys in the school, in high school, to one of the biggest guys in the school. Became a bully. Didn't take any nonsense from nobody. I was very good with my hands. I was 16 years old when I started bouncing in clubs. I wasn't old enough to be in the club when I was bouncing. So because I was so good with my hands, it was fine. So I had this anger which was ridiculous, and it formed everything in me. How I did relationships, how I handled conflict with other men. Much of my relationships were really born out of insecurity. Would she like me? Am I enough? And then you go into relationships like that, you end up getting hurt. And I got hurt many times, too many times, because I was looking for approval in the wrong place.
And how was your relationship with women, with girls?
Because at the age of 15, it was becoming about intolerable for me to stay with my dad. The physical beatings, it was just too much. So I started planning to go live with my mom. I was in contact with my mom. I really started, I think, exploring girls at about 15, which is late for most guys nowadays.
Yeah, it's late for
right?
most guys.
So at 15, my mom, once I lived with my mom raised me to be a gentleman. So while I had this temper on the side, never ever raised my hands to a female, never ever did those kind of things. But I had massive, what is the word? I had this because of my insecurity, I had this desire for approval. And so I would be the perfect guy.
So that's how you entered
Yeah,
relationships with
yeah.
women.
You know, so my mom taught me how, you know, a lady never pays for anything. You know, you open doors. I do that to this day. So a lot of the good I've maintained, but the thing driving that was a need for approval.
Yeah.
Right? Wanting to be wanted. And so when that, you know, you keep that up, insecurity, you know, will show its head very quickly.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier on that you started therapy and counseling. When did you start therapy?
There's been several times through my life where I've gone for counseling. My earliest recollections was after my parents got divorced. I was a primary school child. Under 10 at that time was in counseling, but it was very surface level. There were lots of things because of my dad's abuse that I didn't get counseling for. And then when relationships blew up and imploded, there were times when I would seek counsel. But because I wasn't a Christian, it was always from friends or more experienced men, guys that were older than me. And then good couple of years ago, maybe about 12, 15 years ago, I went through one of the biggest trials of my life. And then I actually went and I was seeing a professional counselor, therapist, and a Christian counselor. And that's where I actually slipped into depression just prior to that. It was a hellish ordeal, that part. So that was another place. And then more recently, just a little shy of 4 years ago, I experienced a divorce. My wife of 21 years walked out of our marriage. She was in love with somebody else, and out she went. And there was a lot to it. But that was a hurt, and I felt a betrayal. From a Christian standpoint, it was very hard because it was a same-sex involvement. I fought for my kids, so single dad looking after his kids. And but yeah, there's been sporadic occasions through my life where counseling has come in, and I wouldn't be here today when the divorce was happening, for example. I was on the verge. That was the second time I felt depression coming back. And the best way I can describe it, if anybody's been depressed, it's almost like a cloud, like darkness that comes. And I've got a picture on my phone with the hand of Jesus with a hole in it. And he's extending his hand, and there's clouds, black clouds of darkness coming, and he's holding it off just by his hand. And I've kept that image. It's on my phone. I've kept it for last 12, 15 years on my phone, because it reminds me that he's the power that, you know. And so when I went through my divorce, I felt like the old clouds from 15 years ago was coming back. That the enemy could reach out and grab me at will whenever he wanted to. And that was scary because I thought, hey, I went for counseling. I was on meds for 5 years. I was institutionalized. I had booked myself into Crescent Clinic, a KISO. I did a 21-day program. I was suicidal. I had four attempts on my own life. Right? And so I know the pain. I know the darkness. Today I have so many people coming to me at the church. And while others may have it up here, you know, intellectually learned about depression, I've got the stripes on my back.
Yeah.
I've been there, right? I'm not a textbook soldier. So I'm able to help people because of what I've been through. And so that experience was a really rough one. But I remember one of the pivotal points in my life during the divorce was the therapist telling me, she asked me, she said, Neville, are you going to hurt yourself? And my ex-wife was sitting on the couch next to me. She said, I'm not worried about her, I'm worried about you. Are you going to hurt yourself? And I said, I'm thinking about it. Because I felt like my life's over. You know, I'm in the ministry. This has happened to me. You know, what an embarrassment. I'm done. I'm over. It's over for me. And why live?
Yeah.
And she said something that saved my life. She said, Neville, if you hurt yourself, there will be a day that your son and your daughter go through trials, go through something hard, and they'll remember, if my daddy could take an easy way out, I can take an easy way out.
Yeah, true.
And I can't explain to you, I don't know if anybody's been, and I know there's many have, been that hurt, where you look at your watch, the next minute is so painful, you don't know how you're going to survive the minute.
Exactly. I know.
Right?
how it feels like.
Leave the next hour. The next minute,
minute.
is so sore. So that's what I was going through at the time. How do I get through the next minute? The next 60 seconds feels like, when you know, if I was to physically hurt myself really bad, my brain doesn't know the difference between physical pain and emotional pain. It just knows there's pain.
Yeah.
Right? And so when she said, one day your son or your daughter may take your way out,
Yeah.
that was inconceivable for me. I broke down, I wept so bitterly, and I remember praying right there in the office. I said, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to get through this minute.
Yeah.
But today I choose to survive.
You know, when you just said that question that the therapist asked you, I felt something in my body, because that is so powerful. Basically, what I feel like the therapist was doing was bringing those dark thoughts into light.
Yeah.
When he or she asked you directly what you were thinking of doing, what you were going to do after this moment.
Yes.
Which goes back to the conversations that we often have, that when it comes to Christianity, it's about honesty.
Authenticity. Come on.
You just have to be honest with Jesus about what you're going through.
Yeah.
And it's a struggle for most of us, because when we are praying, we are using these big words that we've heard people speak, you know, and we are not tapping into what is really happening inside of our hearts.
Right.
And when you also mentioned suicide, I've also tried to take my life at some point. And I know how it feels like. I know, to a sane person, a person who's normal, is kind of like, why would you go there? But in that moment, it's like the emotional pain is so raw.
Yeah.
And it is so painful. You know that there's nothing that can take it away other than you not being alive.
Correct. And I think that's 100% correct. As you were talking, I'm thinking about my experience with pain almost mirrors my experience with God. When I gave my life to Jesus, the reason why I did that was, remember I told you, I didn't believe it. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. So I had actually become atheist. And when pain really hit me hard, God showed himself to me in a way that I knew it was God. And so when pain came, the dark pain, the depressive pain, God showed himself. I knew I didn't have the capacity to pick myself up again. Right? Studied, schooled, educated, all of that. Nothing, I didn't have the propensity to pick myself up, because the pain was just too real. Too real. And so for the person that, you know, thinks, I'll never do that, they're obviously not been there. But what the enemy does, what our psyche does, is lull us almost into this, you know, it's done, you're over.
Yeah.
It's never going to come right.
Yeah.
You're finished.
Yeah.
You're shamed. You're condemned. The list goes on and on and on. And the only way out, and it's a lie, you're unloved, you're unnecessary. You're better off dead.
Yeah.
That was the voice that I was hearing.
You're worthless.
Yeah. You're better off dead. And nobody will miss you if you're not here. And that kind of sentiment is everything God is totally the opposite of. Right?
Yeah.
You are approved. You are loved.
I
You are
belong.
wanted. You belong, right? One of the first things Jesus does is accept us,
Yeah.
right? Grace,
That's so good.
here's my definition of grace. Grace is the unconditional acceptance of an undeserving person by an unobligated giver.
Yeah, okay.
Let me give it to you
I'm
again.
having a moment.
That's good.
I'm having a moment.
Yeah.
I'm tearing up right now because of what you've just said, the way you said it, that the one thing that Jesus does is accept us.
Yes.
Because I also struggled with that.
Yeah.
When I went through therapy, I found out that my struggles was not my husband, and the things that he was doing. It was how I grew up and the experiences that I had as a child.
Yes.
And how they had led me to believe that I was not enough,
Yeah.
that I was not accepted.
And I think, you use the word being real, being authentic.
Yes.
David prayed prayers, some of the most authentic prayers, my soul, why are you disquieted within me? Right? He prayed, in his anger, break the teeth of my enemies. David suffered depression. Job suffered depression. Elijah suffered depression, wanted to die.
Yeah.
Right? And so the call for authenticity is to be able to come to God when you see Him. We spoke before this podcast. We talked about a lot of our pain is born from a place of not knowing or understanding the Father heart of God.
Yeah.
Right? It's an orphan heart or an orphan spirit, and so we're born into a sinful world.
Yeah.
Right? We're born into sin. And so we're born rejected, naturally. But the first thing you do when you come to Christ is He accepts you.
Yeah.
It's the unconditional acceptance of an undeserving person by an unobligated giver.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to, but He does. And He just accepts and just receives you and receives me. It's the most beautiful thing
Yeah.
in the world.
It is. It feels beautiful right now in my
Yeah,
heart.
it does. It does. It does.
Yeah, so let's go back.
Yeah.
You said that you had depression the second time when
Yes.
you got divorced.
Yes.
Let's go back to the first time when you
Yes.
realized you had depression.
Yes.
What led you to that realization? What triggered you to get help?
Right. Let me say this. If you're thinking and contemplating suicide, you are not well. Normal people don't think about killing themselves. Right? You are clinically depressed. Now, obviously, you need to go and see a psychologist, psychiatrist, your doctor. Somebody needs to label you as such, and then you look at medication going forward. But when I knew I wasn't afraid to die, I knew I was in trouble. I wasn't killing myself didn't scare me. The fact that I wasn't scared of killing myself scared me. That's what scared me, right? I had, up to that point, had 4 attempts. There's no physical reason why I'm alive. Medically, no physical reason why I'm alive. I should have been dead. So I wasn't playing around. When I did what I did it to end it. And when I woke up the next day, I was so mad that I was so useless. I couldn't even kill myself. So that's when I called my doctor and said, I'm in danger. My kids were really young. My marriage was struggling. I need help. And so I ended up going to see a therapist, and I checked myself into a KISO. Right? It was something that saved my life. What I learned on the 21-day program saved my life. I needed to be on medication. I wasn't sleeping.
Yeah.
I needed a mild sedative to help me sleep. I needed a mood stabilizer. I needed an antidepressant.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. I think many people who are listening to us right now probably are going through some form of depression or mental struggles. But the world has taught us to self-medicate. That's where you find people who will try to self-medicate depression or mental issues with alcohol and drugs. And then they end up in another level of sickness, which is
Yes.
addiction. So how do we reach out, to those people who are probably depressed, but they've figured out that maybe alcohol or drugs is helping me, sustaining me?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
The highest form of government is self-government, to be able to know where I'm at, right?
We spoke about this.
Right, so highest form.
Yeah.
If you're a child, your mom has to tell you, make up your bed, clean your room. But when you start maturing, you wake up, you clean your room, you make up your bed. It's the first thing you do. You go brush your teeth. You don't need to be told.
Yeah.
Self-government. So it's also critically important that you're able to assess yourself, right? Assess. I am not in a good space. Everybody has sad days. Everybody has down days.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a cloud of darkness. You pull the curtains over the window. You shut your phone off. And you sleep for days. You don't want to wake up. You don't want to eat. You want to die. That's depression, right? And so if anybody's in that kind of space, you need to get help.
Yeah.
I think what helped me tremendously was really my relationship with the Lord. I cited these examples of people in the scriptures that had depression. I was aware enough that it was okay to hurt in an area. If we body, soul, and spirit, you can hurt in an area and still be a child of God, right? You're not forsaken by God, just emotionally sick.
That's acceptance you
Yes,
spoke about earlier,
yes.
that you are accepted in every part of who you are.
Yeah. If my kid does something wrong, they're not my kid because they, hey Jordan, I'm going to disown you as being my son.
Yeah.
Or hey Casey, you're no longer my daughter. That doesn't happen. And if we who are flawed and fallible treat our kids that way, how much more loving Father who's much better at being a parent than we are.
He's the best.
Much
And
better.
it also goes back to this understanding of what love is.
Yeah.
I think for most of us, we see love as an exchange. Like, you love me.
Transactional.
Transactional, yes. You love me if I do this. If I'm a good child, then my parent is going to love me. Maybe it's because of how they were raised as well. There's just this generation of thinking that love is transactional. And so it's hard for us to even receive the concept of just being unconditionally loved.
Yes.
It's hard for us to get there.
It is ridiculously tough. You really have to have an encounter with God. You really have to see God in the context of the scriptures. And that's the only thing that'll help you. Because what happens is, here's the thing, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but Christianity is the only religion that has atonement for sin. Right? Everybody else has to work and strive and hope one day God lets you in to heaven. How do you know, must I help another old lady across the road, or, what's not enough, right? In Christianity, we go from the need to do, right, and actions and get your works done, to this heaven to earth downward mobility. Religion is man's quest for God, upward.
Yeah.
But Christianity is God's quest for man.
Yeah.
He comes looking for me. He runs and chases me down and wrestles me to the floor and ruffles my hair and won't let me go. He's that.
Yeah.
Right? The prodigal son in Luke 15. In his mess, God, the Father doesn't wait to clean him up. Go and have a shower before I hug you. He grabs him and loves him and kisses him and regifts him in his mess. And so it is it's just outside of our mind and how it is we reason that a God can do that.
Yeah.
And that's what's beautiful about Christianity. Here's a Savior who died for you, who comes after you. The scripture says he loved you while yet a sinner. And in your brokenness, in your mess, in your orphan spirit, he revealed. You don't see this revelation of God as a father in other religions. Christianity is one of the only religions where this concept of God as a father, it doesn't present itself elsewhere. It's incredible. Incredible. So once that happens and you recognize this counterintuitive, reckless, promiscuous love of God.
It's ridiculous.
Ridiculous, right?
Love.
That comes after you, and you don't deserve it. You're not clean enough for it. And don't get me wrong, God hates sin. God hates how sin destroys us. But he loves us. Right? And so part of the enemy's ploy was to take what God hates, which is sin, and put it in what God loves, which is us, and cause this problem, And when we finally get to the place that my fulfillment is in Jesus, that I don't need another relationship or a side chick or another husband or another wife or this or that, when my fulfillment is in him. Right? That was the woman at the well, right? You had five husbands, 5 guys. And the guy you're shacking with. What was she doing? She's at a well. She was thirsting for the wrong thing.
Yeah, which is what we do.
Yeah.
As human beings.
Correct.
Yeah. I also want to talk about when you were going through depression.
Yes.
Because from my experience, I know that we go through these mental struggles. When we come out on the other side, we are able to see a different version of God.
Yes.
So what things did you recognize, or maybe things that you realized during that time of depression that you needed to walk away from, or you needed to change your perspective in terms of how you were seeing God in that particular time, or how you had seen God in the past times in your life?
Right. The enemy is a master at illusion. There's a story of a child and a father, they driving away from the cemetery where they just buried their mom, right? So the father's in the car, tears down his eyes, child, and they're driving home after the funeral, come to a railway line. And as they stop the railway line, the train comes by, right? And they have to wait. And of course, with the size and the enormity of the train, it casts quite a shadow over the car. And the little boy says to his dad, he says, "Dad, what is death like? What is death like? Why did the preacher say that Jesus takes away the sting of death?" And in that moment, God gave this father an illustration. He said, "Son, we parked here right now. Would you rather want to be hit by this train or hit by the shadow of this train?" And he said, "But of course, the shadow." And he said, "Son, that's what death is. It's a shadow. The sting of death, he wants to make it look like the train, but it's just the shadow. We'll pass from this life into the next and be with him, and you'll be with your mom again." And so I think for us to recognize there are things that the enemy does to amplify things, right? Amplify things. And when you have good friends around you, good counsel around you, good people around you, this is where you bounce these things off. We change in community. That's why it's so important to get counsel, to be part of a good Bible-believing church, to have pastoral friends or people in your life that can really speak into your life. And so I think I've kind of veered around your question, but that's a big thing for me. There's this what's real and what's not. Your pain you perceived is real. You're really feeling it. I get it. But we need to recognize that we have an enemy. We said it before we were shooting. We've kind of told the truth very badly, and the enemy's told a lie very well. And we've not been aware of how stealthy the enemy is to sow hurt, division, pain. Because he knows, he knew how to whisper to one lady in the garden. He knows how to speak, and do so in a way that is, we don't catch it's him. We think it's our own thoughts. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you need to give me a little more clarity if I veered off there.
I think for me, when I was going through my hard times,
Yes.
I think one of the things that really pushed me to seek help
Yes.
was the hard times that I was going through in my marriage.
Wow.
My husband had his own trauma. I had my own trauma.
Right.
And when we came together, things were just not. It was hell, basically.
Right.
It was a very tough, emotionally draining, toxic situation. But we wanted to make it work.
Wow.
We really wanted to. So when that season of my life happened, it really pushed me to a place of seeking help and starting counseling. It was the first time in my life that I had counseling and therapy. I've always heard about those things, but I never thought they were for me, And so when I started my counseling and my therapy journey, I had to also learn and be open to a different way of seeing God. I realized that there were many places where I was never seeing God as a father to me.
Right.
I just saw him as someone who's sitting high on a throne and is basically looking at me and pointing all the things that I'm not doing right.
Wow.
And then when I started to see him as a father, it was like my eyes were open, because now I could go to him and just be open about how I was feeling.
Right.
And he would meet me in those places where I was really ashamed, embarrassed, sad, hurt, and he would come in and give me a hug, and love me like a father would. So that time of depression led me to the place of understanding who God truly is.
Yeah.
And I had gone a number of years thinking that he was this master who wanted me to perform. So I think that's where I'm going with the question.
Right.
Like, when you were going through your own depression phase, and maybe you were on the other side of it, then you realize, oh, maybe there was a way, or there was a place where I was putting God in my life, and through this process of pain, I'm able to see him in a different light.
Yeah, I think like you, pain was the vehicle. Pain was the vehicle. All pain is designed to bring you to your knees. All pain. It's supposed to bring you to the place where you recognize your powerlessness. God will never bless you in your life with something that's going to draw you away from him. He is interested in your dependency on him. He doesn't need it. He's not an egomaniac. But he's a God of relationship. And he wants relationship because he knows the consequences that once this life is over, there's a whole new reality out after this.
Yeah.
That is very eternal. And so I think the same thing when I said to you outside of, before we started the podcast, the biggest realization is to recognize that most of us have a wounded, an inner wound, an orphan heart, or an orphan spirit. We are broken in our understanding of fatherhood. Most have, and even if you had a great father, he doesn't compare to that father.
Yeah, no.
Right? And so our trauma, our pain, our hurts, our abuse, all of these things are tailored to drive us to our knees. One of my heroes in the faith says that God's address is at the end of your rope. And that's where we find him. There's a beautiful poem written by a lady who's passed away called Songbird. And she says with this refrain that God can be found on the bathroom floor. You know, in her pain, that's where she would find herself collapsing. And yeah, he's in, you know, many of my friends, some of them are pastoring great churches today, will tell you similar stories. It was their pain that eventually got them to see that there was a loving Father outside of this. And once you yield to that, everything changed. Yeah. Everything changed. I think surrender is a big thing, right? Because our natural tendency is to want to...
Is to fight.
To fight, to fix it ourselves. You can do it. And that's what we are told.
Yeah.
Until you find a problem that's too big for you.
Yeah, yeah. I did.
We all do. We all do.
Yeah. So how is your healing journey now?
I'm in a good place. I'm in a very good place. I'm in a healthy place. After my divorce, I went through almost a year of extensive counseling again with a therapist and a Christian counselor. I still have certain people in my life that I'm accountable to. I make sure that that's, you know, and I found myself, I catch myself every now and again, you know, showing the scars of my trauma. You know, so for example, I'm airing my laundry now. You know, I would have an argument with my girlfriend. She's the most amazing lady, just an absolute gift from God. I'd have an argument with her and I would find myself shutting off, completely shutting off. And she'd ask me, like, where's this coming from? Until I spoke to a friend of mine. And because I had a ex-wife that was very critical, I could never do anything right. Because that was what I was dealing with. Every time, we're in trouble if you think correction is criticism.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So if I try and correct you and you see it as criticism, or there's something to deal with there. And so that's where I was. So even as somebody who's well and healthy, I'm finding areas every now and again, and God will use the people closest to you to expose it. You know, you don't think you have a temper, great, and so a taxi driver cuts you off. You know, let's see how you handle that one. Right?
Okay, that's me. I was just telling my friend I didn't realize how much road rage I had until I started driving.
Right.
Like I'm finding myself doing crazy things. I'm like, why did I just do that?
But even that is a fruit, right? One of the sources of depression, there's several, but one of the sources of depression is anger turned inward.
Yeah, true.
Right? It's anger turned inward. We cross about something, we're angry about something's unfair, whatever the case may be. And this thing festers. You haven't dealt with it. So the taxi driver cuts you off and now you think you're angry at the taxi driver. And we hide behind justice.
Yeah.
He skipped the red traffic light or whatever. So we hide it, and we don't really know, buddy, you've got an issue that goes back to your childhood.
It's my problem.
That's
actually.
it. Or your ex-husband did so-and-so to you, or your ex-wife did so-and-so to you. And so, you know, God asked this beautiful question in Genesis, where are you? Where are you? You know, the example used in the sermon yesterday in church was, if somebody wants to come to your house, they're on their way to your house, you ask them, so where are you? Because only once you've located yourself can we give you directions to where you need to be, right? You're in a mall, you go to the little thing, it says, you are here, you know where to go to, but you need to locate yourself first.
Yeah, so that's the question we need to ask ourselves.
Where are you?
Where am I?
And most importantly, where am I in relation to God? Because if you find yourself outside of Him, you're still lost.
Yeah. I had to realize also after I had almost killed myself reacting to a taxi driver.
Wow.
I had to be like, okay, what's wrong with me?
Wow.
Because I recognize that it's not the taxi driver at this point.
Yeah.
I almost killed myself. I almost caused
That's
an accident
crazy.
because I'm responding to what they did. There has to be something wrong with me.
There's this, I think it's Genesis 25. Rebecca's pregnant. Right? She's got these twins, Jacob and Esau, in her womb. And they wrestle, the scripture says they wrestle in her womb. And there's an insignificant little verse. She doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And she says these words that blew my mind. She says, if all is well, why am I like this? If all is well, why am I like this? And God responds by saying, there's 2 whole nations in you. Imagine the freak out. Yeah, I asked for a child. What do you mean? You know, but prophetically or allegorically, there's 2 whole natures in you.
Yeah, true.
A man after the flesh and a man after the spirit.
Yeah.
And they war against each other.
Yeah.
And we all have to deal with that.
Yeah.
You know, Paul, you know, why is it when I want to do what I know I should be doing, I do this other thing. And the thing I'm not supposed to do, that thing I do. We all have to contend with the flesh. That's a whole nother topic. But yeah.
This has been a wonderful conversation, Pastor. Thank you so much for your willingness to open up and share your dirty laundry with us. But you are safe here.
Thank you. Safe place to land, baby. Safe place to land.
Yes. So do you have any inside jokes between you and Jesus? Anything that you...
Well, one of the things that I found ridiculous, you know, I spend, pastors have tremendously long hours, and I spend a good percentage of my day counseling. And I remember when I was at Bible school, we did a part of our counseling course, we did a course called Boundaries. And I hated this course. I just resented it down. I just thought it's not biblical, it's not right, and it's not. And I remember in my arrogance saying, one day when I have a church of my own, I'll hire counselors. And I think God must have laughed his head off. You presume to know what you're going to do. And the very guy who didn't want to counsel and didn't want to do all of this, now I'm spending most of my time doing just that. And I love it. So God does have a sense of humor.
Yeah. And you've also gone through so much, which allows you to show up in a very deep way for the people who come to you for counseling.
Yeah. Henry Nouwen calls us, he says that we are wounded healers.
Ooh.
We are wounded healers.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds nice. Oh, I love that.
That's beautiful.
Because I would like to go to a doctor who I know has been through what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Because they can show up for me in the best way.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pastor, for joining us today. It was lovely having
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for opening up once again. Thank you guys. Remember to like and subscribe.
You are my safe place from things that I can't face. When it all gets too much for me and I'm lost in my anxiety, and if my heart aches, you breathe with